Hi everyone, this is Sarah again from my Real Food Kitchen, and today, as promised, I am going to show you how to make beef stroganoff, which, by the way, first of all, is beef stroganoff. There's no F in Russian. Well, they have an F, but there's no F at the end of stroganoff. It's not stroganoff, stroganoff. Just something that's always bugged me. I lived in Russia for a long time, and I was delighted to find out that they do actually make beef stroganoff in Russia. You know how you go to a lot of places and they've never heard of the things that we associate with that country? Well, they actually make beef stroganoff there. And deliciously, and a little bit differently than perhaps you have grown up eating. So I'm going to explain the subtle differences and teach you how I make it. We're going to start with the beef and get that in the oven so that can get going, and then I will talk to you about the other ingredients that you will need. So first of all, it is again one of those things that is really more an assemblage of ingredients than it is a recipe per se. So I'm just going to talk to you about the ingredients I have here and give you my method. The first of which is to decide what cut of beef to use. I use chuck roast or a pot roast. If you can see it here, I like it because it is a beautifully marbled piece of meat, and I know that if I cook it long and slow, it's going to be mouth-wateringly delicious. A lot of times what people use is something called stew meat, which they are a mishmash of cuts, and what I don't like about them is because they're not from the same cut of beef often, they cook differently, and so I'm not personally a fan of stew meat. I like to know exactly what to expect when I'm going to cook something. And then sometimes those are lean pieces of meat which do not benefit from a long, slow cooking method. A lean cut of meat is going to get dry when you cook it that way. So I've got two beautifully marbled pieces of meat here, and let's start with those so that we can get them in the oven. I'm going to cook them just like you would a pot roast, and then I'm going to add in all the other stroganoff ingredients and talk to you about that later. But I need to get them in the oven so that they're done by the time my guests come later this evening. So the first thing is, I like to take them out of their package, whatever it is. And first of all, I'm fussy about my meat. I only buy organic meat. Not to say that you have to, but that's important to me, so I don't eat lots of meat consequently. But no matter where it comes from, I like to take it out of its package and I wash it, and then I put it on some paper towels and dry it a little bit. And then we are going to brown it on the stovetop and then put it in the oven. The first thing it needs is some flour, and salt and pepper, flip it over, do the same thing on the other side. And if it's smaller, I actually like to put it in like a Ziploc bag or something and just shake it around. These are gargantuan, so they're not going to fit in there. But that's a nice tidy way of doing it. And then this will be both the pan that I brown them in and the pan that I bake them in. Obviously, if you were cooking these two gigantic pieces of meat, you could use a Dutch oven, for example, works well. But the thing is, a pot roast is a covered cooking process. So I'm going to have to cover this with tin foil when the time comes. Right now, I'm going to put it across the burners. And get it good and hot. And for this, I'm going to use olive oil. And we'll just let that get hot, and then I'm going to sear this on both sides, and I'll show you what they look like when I'm done. Alright, so I have been browning the beef, which is now nicely browned, so let's go take a look at it, and then I will show you how I deglaze the pan. Alright, so as you can see, it's nicely browned, and just remind you there's that old rule when you're browning meat that if you try and turn it and it gives you any resistance, it means it's not been browned. So while it's still sizzling, this is a little bit of vermouth in here, dry vermouth, that I'm going to add to the pan. Just a little bit. I'm going to put more in the mushrooms when I cook those. And then this is beef stock, which I tend to have my own supply of beef stock on hand, but the organic stuff that you buy in the grocery store will be just fine. And then I usually cover it to just about halfway up the meat, which as it turns out is the perfect amount. I'm going to cover it with tin foil. I'm going to put it in an oven that is 325 degrees for 2.5 hours, possibly 3, but at 2.5 I'm going to take it out and test it. And I want it to be nice and tender without any sign of it getting dried out. Alright, so I will put this in the oven, and then we'll come back and I'll talk to you about the other ingredients.